Hey everyone, I'm Josh from Comet Backup, and I'm really thrilled today to be coming and talking to you and really just introducing Jordan's talk today. Before we get into that, let's just all give a really huge thank you to Wes and the whole team for everything that they did to put into this event. The amount of work behind the scenes, I mean, we're privy to see it, has been nuts. And so, big shout out to those guys for doing it. We absolutely love the objectives behind it and the reasons why they're doing it. And so we couldn't be more than happy to support this type of event. Just quickly, if you haven't heard of us, we are actually an ex-MSP that turned backup vendor a long time ago now. We do one thing and one thing only, and that's try and build really good backup software day in and day out, and that's our singular focus. But anyway, we're here today to talk about Jordan. And so I had the chance to catch up with him the other day and have a little bit of a preview of his talk, who he is, and what he's doing. So Jordan's the director of managed services at Mirazon, and he's responsible for delivering services to both customers, both big and small. Originally hailing from Hawaii, he now calls Kentucky home. A little bit of a change in the climate there. Asked him his background and how would he describe himself to people he hasn't necessarily spoken to before. He described it, I think, how a number of us do, and that is he's been in the MSP space forever in pretty much every sort of role and in the technical space. I asked him about why he's passionate about this topic, and he really described it as it boils down to his own firsthand experiences of going from an engineering role to suddenly becoming a manager, and now you're responsible for people, and people have feelings and emotions, and how you talk to them and how you engage with them. And so he's been able to draw from his own experiences of that. The last thing that I asked him was if there was one thing that he would hope that people would be able to take away from his talk today, it would be that they'd be able to take one idea and start to change or implement one small thing and incrementally improved. Now, what those things are, that's what Jordan's going to be talking about today. Um, the big thing, with him and how we're wanting to have this session today is that you've got any questions for Jordan, feel free to ask them in the chat. He's going to answer as we go. And then also if there's an overflow of questions, which hopefully they are, because this should be a fantastic session, we'll look to do a Q&A at the end. But hey, Jordan, let's look to hand over to you.
Cool, man. Thank you very much. Let's see. How do I get this thing to show on my screen? Or how do we share my screen here, Eric? Hmm. There we go. All right, you guys can see my screen okay now? Somebody give me a thumbs up in the chat or I don't know, something cool. All right. I'm Jordan Silva. I see a bunch of people from Hawaii jumping in. Much love to you all. I miss you guys too. I'll be back home probably sometime the next couple of months and to say hello. But today I'm here to talk about something I call the critical culture controls framework. So, like they said, I'm Jordan. I've spent my entire career basically in managed services. Started off out in a small MSP in Hawaii, came up as a systems engineer and things like that. Got into InfoSec, got to work with cool people like Jasper, who's in the chat, over at Hawaiian Telecom for a while. Now I am the director of managed services here at Mirazon in Louisville, Kentucky. I also have a infrequently updated YouTube channel, MSP Culture. And really, what got me into kind of thinking through culture as a thing is I was really bad at it. So what I tell people pretty regularly is anything I've written down in a PowerPoint at some point is a mistake I made, and I'm just hoping the next guy doesn't really have to do that. Dealing with organizational culture is complicated. It's hard if you're an engineer like me who really deals in the logical, practical, like tangible stuff. And culture isn't any of that. It's dealing with people who are kind of mushy and squishy. It's dealing with concepts that aren't really intuitive to me and to others. So my goal here was really to put something together that was a little more familiar, and I hope it helps. So shout out stuff in the chat if you have questions along the way, but let's get cranking. For those of you who were here last year at Rejection Con, we talked about some cool stuff. At least I thought so. We talked about what is organizational culture, right? And that is a big question. You can get a million answers from a million different people. But I think at the beginning or at the end of all this, organizational culture it's a social contract, right? It's an agreement we all make with each other. and our teams and our managers and our customers and everybody we engage with day to day that governs how we behave and how we treat each other. And if we violate that contract, that's where things like trust start to erode and conflict gets really high and not the productive kind. That's where things start to kind of fall apart and get ruined. So we talked a lot about what organizational culture is last year, and today we want to expand a little bit on how to drive and develop that a little bit. We also talked a bit about who in your organization gets to define your culture. And ultimately, the answer to that is everybody gets to define their culture. But one of my favorite quotes on who defines your culture is one by Stephen Todd Whitaker. And it talks about how the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior leadership allows to really exist or tolerate. And most people joining today are probably in some kind of leadership role, whether that's a formal management role or just somebody people look up to in the organization. If you're at a conference like this, you're looking to self develop, and that probably means you're leading people. Um, the behaviors we tolerate, either intentionally or because we're neglecting things or we're just letting them slide because we don't have the energy to stop them, those are the things that are going to develop your culture and define your culture as a whole ultimately. So we have to acknowledge right out of the gate that culture is something that we have to deal with. Otherwise, it will get formed on its own. You can't fall into a position where your culture is just going to be non-existent, right? Like, it's going to exist. So you as a leader, you as somebody in your organization, kind of have to grab that bull by the horns and run with it. And we look back at the pyramids, right, for guidance. I think lots of people in the universe have done this. The pyramids we're talking about today are going to be things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We're talking about what makes humans tick, what makes people happy, healthy, functional. We're going to talk a little bit about some of Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, right? Want to make sure we have trust, we have safety, we have commitment, we have the ability to hone in on results and drive organizations through that. So what we're really talking about today is, a collection of information that really smart people have put together. We don't have to reinvent that wheel. We just have to maybe look at it a little bit differently. So what's the problem we're trying to solve with this culture framework? I think ultimately, if you've gone and read all of the Lencioni books, all the Jim Collins books, all the Simon Sinek books I did, that was on my quest to be a non-terrible manager. I kind of read all of those multiple times, but it still felt really weird to me. The idea of just sort of following blind advice from some guy in a book and asking people what is making them tick is really hard. I'm an engineer. I like looking at logs. I like seeing what the sim says is broken. I like knowing what the error was, and humans don't just have error codes. So when I was becoming a manager, I was like, well, why can't this guy just tell me what will make them happy? And it's probably because the employee doesn't even know what's going to make them happy. They don't know why they feel out of place in your organization or why they want to quit and go somewhere else. And they don't know why the other guy left, right? So a lot of it just felt kind of squishy to me. A lot of what good looked like was ambiguous. It was kind of unclear. I didn't know how to get from A to B. And I think a lot of people have that challenge. And it wasn't really intuitive to me. I can walk around and somebody tells me I'm doing a bad job. I'm going, oh shit, I should do a better job. Like, I don't want to be doing a bad job, but I'm going to say, what can I do better? And they might shrug and walk away, or hopefully they can give me some good advice. But giving feedback in a non-abrasive and functional way is a chore for some people, and we have to work on it. But having a framework to help guide that definitely helps. And I think almost all of us have probably been in a position at some time where the company we worked in was terrible. And we've seen a lot of these things be implemented really poorly. And that kind of sucks, right? Because if you've seen a manager do something bad, you don't really want to replicate the bad. Or you might be like, well, I read this book, it said do one-on-ones, but I hate my one-on-ones with my manager. So I'm going to go to the other way and just not do those. So because we all have these negative experiences with what are ultimately good practices, we sort of get into this trap of not wanting to implement known good stuff because we're afraid or we've only seen the bad version of it. It's like how if you've only been around bad relationships, you kind of don't know how to be in a good one. And this is sort of the thing. And then measuring progress is just really hard. I think it's really hard to be objective about your organizational, posture and understanding where culture is. So a lot of people have taken stabs at trying to fix this, right? We've gone out, there's hundreds of books literally you could read that do this, but I think for people like me and other engineers I know, I think we already kind of had the answer, and it was in this idea of a framework, and we're surrounded by them. Anybody who's in the MSP space, anybody who's in the the security space, these things are kind of second nature at this point, whether it's CMMC, whether it's the SIS-18, whether it's NIST CSF or PCI DSS. Like, we live in this world of like compliance check boxes and sheets, and they tell us what we need to do to be good, or at least be the minimum acceptable version of good, right? Because compliance is kind of a minimum. And I kind of thought to myself, I was like, what if we took all the stuff we know to be good from a cultural perspective and just ram it into a controls framework that you can hand off to some engineer like me who can say, okay, now I have a path that makes sense. And now I know what good kind of looks like. And I know how to test for that, because if you look at a good framework like CMMC, it doesn't only tell you what's good, but it tells you how to audit that. Like, what question do you ask to know if that's actually working properly? And that's really what this is about. So what is the controls framework at as a whole, right? So any controls framework, the goal here is to give people a structured approach. It's to have a path to follow. It's to hopefully prioritize what's the most important or least important, or understand what the difficult steps are, or weight them, right? If you're looking at, NIST, and they have the weighted scores, and where you get negative points for not doing stuff and plus points for doing good stuff. Like, control frameworks are there to help kind of simplify what ultimately can be dozens or hundreds of controls that you need to put in place in a way that you can manage it. And it looks like we just hit $15,000. That's amazing. So anyway, very cool. Great job, everybody. But the controls framework is there to help guide this journey, right? So when we started talking about culture, that's what the deal was. So what is the critical culture controls framework? Well, put simply, it's a controls framework that took a lot of good ideas that other people had, best practices that we've seen kind of work, and prioritize them, sort them a little, add some new ones, and add some objectivity to it. It got built out in I don't know, the goal here was to just put some objectivity and framework around a lot of ideas. It's comprised right now of about 45 best practices and actions. I'm going to say currently, because this is a beta idea, right? Like, this is let's work on this together. It's a framework that started. It definitely needs feedback and polish. But ultimately, right now, we're right at around 45 best practices and action items, things that you should be doing in your business, things that you can do. They're organized into what we call control groups, and then also into implementation levels. Culture is kind of no different, right? It's about walking then running. I think if we jump from trying to be a really like immature organization to an incredibly mature organization, you get into trouble. Culture really isn't any different. You can't go from zero accountability to, extreme ownership overnight. If when you try to do that, people feel out of place, they get confused. You usually have this negative reaction from everybody sort of engaged. So a good control framework, and one of the goals here was to put something together that showed us where to start, and to kind of help you understand that there's foundational elements that you need to do first, and then you can move on from there. Because without foundational elements, it's not going to work. People are going to get confused. Like, it's going to do probably more damage than good, even sometimes. So the implementation levels kind of look like this. Level one are foundational things. These are things that basically every business can do. Big or small, big budget, no budget, it doesn't matter. These are the things that, as managers, we could probably start doing tomorrow. Level two are going to be what I'd call operational. So you have your foundational elements. You're willing to take a little bit more planning, a little bit more time, a little bit more engagement with your team, and you're going to start implementing maybe a little more intentional stuff. Level three, what I call integrated. It means that you're past the basics. You have a methodology that you're now following a framework. If you're using this, obviously you're on that track, right? You have a method to the madness at this point. So you can take bigger jumps. You can take deeper swings at things. You can work with people in a more intentional manner, and they're not going to freak out because for the first time you're asking how they're doing, right? Like, your organization is sort of at this point primed for doing intentional culture work. When we get to level four controls, we're talking about things that you're taking this pretty seriously, and people understand what the point of it all is you are making these decisions because you are trying to change the culture. You are strategically making decisions to drive in a specific direction to get a specific outcome with your team. And then level five are what we call transformational controls. These are the things that honestly are difficult to implement. They're hard. Not every business will get to level fours and fives, right? Like, that's the idea in a framework, is we have to be able to right size some of this stuff. So a level five control These are the things that maybe you never get there. Maybe as an owner, you're never going to be comfortable sharing full, transparent financial data about your organization. I encourage you to get over that, but some people never will. So maybe they never hit this level 5 kind of tier, right? But it's where we are, and when I was kind of going through this, I was talking to John Strand a bit back over at Write a Boom when we were going through the SIS 18 controls trainings, and one of the things he said, and I think it was maybe his brother mentioned it, is if you can get 85% of this stuff done or 80% of this stuff done, you are so far ahead of your peers that it's a game changer, because most people will never get 20% of this or 30% of this done. So when we were talking a little bit ago about like what is a differentiator for your business, this kind of stuff are the differentiators, right? It's anybody can go online and buy any tool that you have as an MSP. Anybody, you're hiring from the same pool of techs. Like I like to think I have the best techs, but I have the best techs for my company right now because they fit my culture. It's not because they're inherently the best engineers on earth. Like I will never pretend that's the case, but they're the best for my team, and they're the best for our culture. Yeah. So, and that's kind of what we want to deal with when we talk about implementation levels. Let's see. So, and ultimately, the outcome of this is it's a structured and objective method to build the culture your organization needs, right? Like going back to the beginning, culture is inherently difficult and it's squishy because it's about feelings and it's about people fitting in, and it's about going back to Maslow, it's about like this quest to obtain personal enlightenment almost at a pure level, right, where you want the people working for you to be so secure and so confident in their roles and have so much clarity in what they're doing that they can just be the best version of themselves. And I think if we can all work towards that, that is a differentiator, right? Like if imagine if like half your team just knew that they could make whatever decision they needed to make your customer happy and didn't have to think twice about that, and they weren't worried that if they made a mistake somebody was going to scold them, or if they went over budget on the ticket they were going to get their hand slapped, right? Like imagine if they could all come to work and just show up and not feel afraid of making decisions on their own, and they could just focus on taking care of the customer. How much better off you'd be. It's a shitload more than whatever tool you're going to buy at the next conference. I can promise that. So that's what we're after here. So let's talk about some of the control groups. Like I mentioned, there's 15 different control groups. We're not going to dive into every single control. So the way we're going to kind of go through the rest of this is we're going to talk about the individual control groups. A control group at a high level is just a thematic element to combine action items, is what I'd call it, right? So we'll talk about one control group. We'll give an example of maybe one of the things that you do as part of it and how this is structured, and the rest will be presented later. But first up, we have purpose alignment. When we talk about what businesses need right from the get-go, right, the ability to align purposes as a business with your employees, with your clients, those all have to sort of be in place if you're going to be successful. So purpose alignment is a control group. Its objective is to make sure everybody on every team understands what the organization's why is and is in alignment with that. Because ultimately, if I disagree with the company that I work for at a foundational level, I'm in the wrong place and I'll probably leave. And I have done that, as at least one person on this chat probably knows. I left my old job because they weren't a bad company. It just wasn't where I wanted to be, and we weren't on the same page about how to go about stuff. And I think that's perfectly okay. We were all very transparent with what we were all doing and wanted, and we separated on good terms, and that's good. That's what purpose alignment is about. A level one, implementation of purpose alignment might look like a defined, documented, and shared organizational mission and purpose statement. You have to be able to state what your purpose is as a business, and you have to be able to communicate that to your team. Otherwise, how will they know? They can't guess what you want to achieve as a business. And an audit criteria would be, can employees clearly articulate that mission and that purpose without having to look it up on the website or check a cheat sheet, right? So when we talk about these control groups, you need a couple of elements. You need to understand the why, so that's the objective. We need to understand what the best practice looks like, and we need to understand what that check looks like, right? What is that audit criteria to make sure you're doing it successfully? Anybody can say they did this stuff, but as we know, just like in any of our other technical controls audits, we want proof, right? We want receipts. So show me the evidence, and the evidence in this case is ask your employees if they can articulate what your vision and your mission is. Why does this company exist? We move on and we talk about things like vision and values integration. So this is control group 2, right? In addition to a purpose, you need to understand what your organization and values are. If you're working with people who don't share the same common values as you, you're going to feel it day to day. You're going to approach problems differently. You're going to prioritize things differently. So we need to make sure that organizational values are stated clearly. We're in alignment with the people who are working there and your customers because it's the same, and they're not just spoken, they're implemented and used, right? So again, a level 1 version of this might just be it's defined, documented, and shared in the organization. The audit against that is pretty simple. It's, can you clearly articulate your core values without having to go look at what's on the wall? When I was with Intech here at Mirazon and others, we would arbitrarily just say, hey, give us our core values and you get $20. And I can tell you, if you just walk around with, pre hybrid everything days, if you walked around with, a small handful of money at an all hands meeting, you could get people to memorize your core values pretty quickly. You can still do that now, but it's about engagement. It's about understanding why this stuff is here. There you go. Wes is asking, right? Who here can post their core values? Let's see who can do it. As we move on, right, we start talking about control group 3, which is clarity of roles and accountability. Now, this is a big one. This goes back to employees feeling secure, right? If we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety is one of the biggest things that people need to be successful and be happy. And one of the biggest elements of safety is understanding what your role in an organization is and what your responsibilities are and what you're accountable for. That way, you know if you're doing good or bad. It's terrifying starting at a new company. And we've talked to other organizations as I've gone through this, and we've interviewed people, and new hires are often terrified when they don't know what their job is. They get hired for this new role. They don't really know how they're being measured just yet. They don't know what they're accountable for. And that's the scariest part of the new job because there's no way they can tell if they're doing good or bad. So, if we look at a level 2 version of the control here, that might be a defined, documented, and shared organizational accountability chart that includes the 3 to 5 things, that you're accountable or a given role or a box is accountable for. If you're familiar with EOS, this is one of the tenets of it, right? It's every role has 3 to 5 accountabilities. It's very clear what the role is responsible and accountable for, and every employee knows that for their job. And that's the audit criteria here is if you go and ask a person, hey, what are you accountable for here at our business? They should know that answer. And it's really important that if they don't know that answer on a given day, unless a dispatcher is handing them a ticket, how will they know what to do? When they're given 10 things to do and the priority on the ticket is all the same, how will they know which one to target and which one to focus on? And if something's not getting done, how will they know if it's their job to get that back on track or to call it out or what they do with that? So you have to kind of look at clarity of roles and accountability as a really critical element of your organization. The the kind of example I like to give is if you're driving down a street, and this happens all the time. I'm on my way to work now, and you get into a really foggy area. Everybody kind of slows down, right? Like you can't really see very far ahead of you when you're driving. If there's a lot of fog, lights are kind of making it harder to see. There's kind of danger around. A deer might pop out, whatever. Clarity is what allows you to kind of go faster when you're driving and accelerate, and you can see further ahead so you can move quicker, you can plan better. Clarity is what gives us that confidence to move, and if people don't know what they're supposed to be doing, they're going to move slow because they're going to have to move cautiously. They don't know how fast they can go, and they don't know how hard they can push. So clarity in roles becomes critical. We talk through healthy conflict norms. This is one of my favorite, and I'm one of the ones I'm the worst at, frankly. I've always thought I was great at conflict. It turns out I was just kind of an asshole for most of my career. And they're not the same thing. Like I have no problem getting in fights with people, but productive conflict isn't just calling someone out and telling them they're wrong. Turns out, you could not have convinced 20-year-old me that was the case. But here we are. Like healthy conflict and norms are critical, right? And they have to be normal in your business. Otherwise, you won't progress. People get better by challenging ideas, by pushing, and iron sharpens iron is the saying. I threw a Jim Collins quote up there because I really like it. But top companies foster cultures where people are brutally honest, without ego or blame, and challenge assumptions to find the best path forward. Brutal honesty, when it comes from a place of caring, is a game changer. It's the kind truth. If you read any of Patrick Lencioni's stuff, like there's a lot of people who've talked about this, but in our case, level 1, it starts with leaders, right? Are leaders in your organization, are you modeling vulnerability by admitting your mistakes, by asking for help, by openly receiving that feedback? You can't expect your staff to ever be okay with conflict unless they see you demonstrate first that, hey, someone can challenge your idea and you're not going to fire them. You're not going to like chastise them. You're not going to put them down. You're just going to accept the feedback because, hey, maybe you're wrong. Um, that's the number one thing I push my staff is like, hey, I have big ideas and I move quick because I get excited. It doesn't mean I think I'm right. It's what I think in the moment is right. So push back on me. Tell me I'm wrong, and you're never going to be punished for telling me I'm wrong. I'll change my mind if you convince me. But that's what healthy kind of conflict looks like. It has to be demonstrated. People have to be able to express disagreement and have a dissenting idea. And you can see from an audit criteria perspective, like when you're in those weekly meetings and you're asking teams how things are going, if everybody's like, everything's great, but you feel like everything's broken, you don't have enough safety for people to call out the problems, right? If you're showing up and you're going to your leadership L10 or whatever your format is for your business, and the things you're talking about are, like, hey, where do we have lunch next week for the big company meeting? Meanwhile, like people are leaving and you've had 4 engineers quit and 3 clients quit, but the topic of your L10 is, what are we doing for the next company pizza party? Like you're not tackling the hard issues. There's not enough safety to engage in conflict, to talk about the hard things. So this is a critical element, and it's why it's one of the controls. Let's see. Effective communication routines. This is a big one, right? Like we have to be very intentional about driving effective communication in our organization. Level 2 kind of looks like regularly scheduled all hand meetings. Like as a leader, you have to put yourself out there. You have to communicate to the group what your intention is, what the goals of the organization are, and then if you failed, come back and explain why. Or if you succeeded, great. Everybody high five. You did your jobs, right? But there has to be this intentional methodology, and people have to know what to expect from that. So the audit criteria is, are employees kept informed of the company's progress towards achieving quarterly, annual, or long-term goals, right? If you had no ability to know if your company was doing good or bad, how would you know if you're doing good or bad? How would you know that anything you're doing mattered, right? Like we all want to feel like we're part of this bigger thing. The only way we know if we're part of that bigger thing is if we know what's trying to be achieved. Let's see. Safe and effective feedback loops. I think this is a really critical control group as well. It goes back to that ability to be safe and give feedback, not necessarily about maybe like what a client is doing wrong, but just the internal functionality. I put this as a level 4 because this is hard. I worked for an organization for a while, and we had an anonymous survey feedback mechanism. And one of the founders of the group, his concern was always that, well, people just use this to vent. And I'm like, well, it's that, or people are giving you feedback in your organization isn't what you think it is. So it takes a lot of self reflection and effort to truly understand if the feedback is noise or if you should listen. And, when I was there, I got negative feedback. People would come and say, hey, Jordan, you're being a jerk about this thing. You didn't have to do that. And I was like, you know what? You're right. So a level 4 kind of implementation is employees have a way to anonymously provide feedback without fear of repercussion from their peers, their managers, other superiors in the organization. They have a way to tell the leadership directly what is going on without putting themselves at risk. And the audit criteria is, can they do that? But more importantly, is the leadership team reviewing that feedback and doing something with it? Like having a suggestion box you just ignore doesn't help. In fact, it's almost worse because you're asking for feedback, then you're ignoring it. So having that kind of stuff come up, absolutely critical. Talent development and growth. If you do not have a talent development or growth path for your team, you are going to lose anybody who's worth keeping. I think there's a couple people from a pretty good talent development platform company on this call, so check them out. Guys over at Empath for sure. But ultimately, a level 5, I threw this in here as like, what does a level 5 look like? And I think Empath is trying to bring this down to like a level 3 probably. But do you have a documented career path for anybody in your company? Do they know where their next steps are? And do you have a plan to get them trained for that, right? Like saying, hey, one day you can be a senior engineer. That's neat. But what really matters is how do they do that? What is the actual criteria to get promoted? What is the training and skill set required to do that? And where do they get that training? If you can get to the point where everybody knows that and your company is doing well enough from a cultural perspective that they're going to stick around, you're going to be great, right? Like you're going to have people with you for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. At Mirzon, that's one of the biggest things that we strive for is we look at talent retention. We want to know how long people are staying here, and we want our employees to be here for a decade. We want to celebrate the 15-year anniversaries of employees, and that means that we need to keep finding ways to advance people, train people, give them challenges. That way they don't get bored and walk off. We have to stay a reasonable company. Otherwise, if we suck, they'll leave. So as an organization, you have to decide if that's your focus. Do you want to be an MSP who gets really good at, churning employees because you think you can keep up that way, or do you want to retain people by growing them over time? Strategic recognition programs. This is another important one, right? People need to be recognized for the work they do, but most importantly, you need a way to recognize people um, for the behaviors that align with your organizational core values and goals. People like recognition. Um, Recognition comes in lots of formats. This doesn't mean that like you have to stand them up in front of a room and applaud and scream and cheer. Not everybody likes that, right? But recognition is understanding how a person wants to be thanked and acknowledged for their efforts, and doing that in a way that aligns with what you're trying to get out of your people, right? If you are saying, hey, what we care about is customer satisfaction, what we care about is longevity of our employees and our clients, and the only people you call out are whoever's billing your highest dollars, your recognition program is not in alignment with your values as an organization, right? So you have to make sure that what you're recognizing people for is the stuff that you're rewarding them for, because that's what's going to motivate them to keep going. So the level 3 is: do you have a formal methodology of doing this? Do you have an employee of the month thing? Do you have some kind of a submission format for employees to be like, hey, my coworker did a great job. Here's what it is. And the audit criteria is: does this exist, and are the rewards that exemplify things like organizational core values, right? Like, are the people living the values that you say you are? Are they contributing to that mission or that purpose? And you're rewarding based on those contributions. Let's see, continuous improvement. This is a huge one. I often get criticized, and people think I'm a pessimist if they only know me for a little while. The truth is, I'm a hyper optimist. I think everything can always be better. So continuous improvement is in my veins. Like the minute we're at point A, I think we could probably get to like point B pretty quickly, and I have to pause myself. But you have to build a culture for continuous improvement. Otherwise, you're going to get stale and die in the tech world. So a level 4 implementation of continuous improvement is: do you have a formal methodology to review your core processes on a regular basis, determine the constraints, and evaluate methods of improvement, right? This isn't just like, hey, how's the sales flow going? Cool, cool, bye. This is, getting into like the nitty gritty, the theories of constraints. Are you looking at those process maps and saying, hey, you know what? I think we can do better here to here. This is where we're slowing down, right? If we add another person here, we're good. If we add an automation here, we're good. But having a way to formally look at these core things and tackle them intentionally instead of waiting for them to break down and erode, that is a level 4 implementation of continuous improvement. Having the team engaged in that process because they know it exists, that's what you're going after. Operational rhythms and cadence. Again, this is all about creating predictability and alignment across the organization, right? Level 1, easy implementation. You can do this tomorrow. Is just establish a meeting rhythm: weekly, monthly, quarterly, for your all hands, your team meetings, your one-on-ones, whatever. Write it down. Just say, this is how we're going to meet. This is the purpose of those meetings. This is how frequently they are. It shows that it's important, and it helps employees understand what they need to plan for. If your meetings change days every day of the week or every week, people can't plan to be there. It doesn't look important because it's just being shuffled around. Say our team meets on Wednesdays at 1. You will be there. Everything gets scheduled around that, right? Like, that is important, and that sets a rhythm for your organization to sort of follow it. They know when communication is going to happen. They know when they can hold on an issue to. They know the next time they're going to have a time with their team to discuss something critical. People can plan. So rhythm, and cadence, critical. There we go. So organizational change management, right? So as we go through here, an example of a level 2 control for organizational change management, and kind of as a reminder, right? Like, these are just examples. For each one of these control groups, there is a level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 generally. Some start at level 2 or level 3, depending on how complicated it is. But there's multiple of these instances per control group. But organizational change management, I think this is a major one. Can your business functionally change when you need it to? Economy's crazy right now, right? Like, regardless of why, it's a little weird. Is your organization able to say, okay, what do we do to pivot? We heavily rely on imports. There's talks of tariffs. What do we do with that? How do we handle our pricing? How do we handle that conversation? We have to have a different strategy today than we did 3 months ago. Let's deal with this, right? Examples of good change practices in an organization is your changes are anchored in core purposes and values. Every time you communicate a major change in your organization, you go right back to that purpose and right back to your values, and you help explain why this change gets you closer to those things, right? If you're just showing up and saying, hey, by the way, next week we're doing X, good luck. Your team's going to be confused. They're not going to like the change, and they're not going to necessarily follow through with it because they don't know why you're doing it. They don't know why it's important, and there's no context. So it's really about understanding, like, why is this change good? Hearing the feedback, maybe ask about it before you implement the change, but really tying it back into those core foundational elements like purpose and values. Data informed decision making, right? This goes right back to, we need objective criteria for making decisions generally. So how do we maintain an objective focus on goals and goal attainment and productivity? It can't just be like, oh, things feel good. We have to look at the numbers sometimes, right? Level two looks like you have a regularly updated scorecard. This isn't day one stuff. A well developed scorecard with KPIs. Level one, maybe it's pick some KPIs for your organization. Level two, it's really, now you have a scorecard that you're bringing to every meeting. Everybody's reporting and checking in on their number, right? That goes back to what you're accountable for. And you have it at a, not just an organizational level, right? Like, the organization maybe has a margin target, an EBITDA target, whatever. What are the team's goals? What are they chasing? And then maybe a level three version of that looks like, now each employee has a KPI that they're coming to the table with during their one-on-ones. But the audit criteria here again is, do you have that tangible scorecard? Are you reviewing it? Are you making decisions by it? Are you living it? Or is it just something you threw up there to check a box somewhere? All right. Let's see. We're almost there. We got transparent decision making. This is another important piece of being a good leader, right? Simon Sinek said, trust is built on telling the truth, not delivering results. That's 100% true. It's okay to fail sometimes. Like, we're going to miss goals. As long as we're transparent about why we made decisions, what we're doing, and we're communicating that effectively, we'll usually get through things as a team. The moment people don't know why we're doing something, or they're confused about the circumstances of a decision, is when trust starts eroding really quickly. Transparency is the ultimate deterrent of trust erosion. So level two is communicate decisions and their rationale clearly and regularly, right? If you're making a change that impacts a bunch of people, and even if that change went sideways, explain why. What happened? What are we going to do next time to prevent it from going sideways? And the audit criteria is, are key decisions being communicated proactively? So don't wait for something to explode. Be like, hey, we're making a change. Here's the new documentation. Here's why we're doing it. Any questions? Cool. Tomorrow, this is in effect. And do employees understand the whys behind some of this stuff, right? Like, why is the change necessary? What is the benefit of that change? Inclusive decision making. Again, this goes to, I threw this example at a level three, but having a framework to make decisions is important, right? You want to make sure your team feels part of that. That way they take some ownership in it. As you progress from like the basics of asking your team stuff, the level three version of this is, how do you build cross-functional decision making? How do you trust another team to give you honest feedback about your group and help make decisions that impact you and your team and maybe not them? You need that diversity in thought, right? You need that different viewpoint to make good decisions long term. So you have to have a decision making process that allows feedback from other groups. A good example is hiring in my world. Like, as part of our hiring process, a second manager from another team has to be in one of the interviews, and it's because, one, we want people who start working here to have contacts within the organization, but we never want to be in an echo chamber. We want the thoughts of our other leaders, like, even if they're not working with them day to day or even part of the same group. I want to know what the other managers in our organization are thinking. I want to know what our leaders think about people we're bringing into this org, because it's going to impact everybody. So you have to have diversity in your decision making. And the last control here is what I'd call embedded accountability. None of this works without accountability. So while this one's last, it's probably one of the most important, right? Accountability isn't blaming each other. It's not calling out all the faults. It's not pointing and saying, haha, you blew it. It's about holding each other to that social contract. So a level 2 implementation of this is what I'd call pure accountability, right? It's when you're setting goals in your organization, is your team aware that their job is to kind of hold people to setting goals that make sense for your team, but also completing them, right? When you're going into your rock setting meetings and you're deciding what to do for the quarter, if you kind of just lob some easy things up there, like is somebody on your team going to say, Jordan, is that really the best thing you can do this quarter? Like that sounds like you're sort of just tackling things you plan to do anyway and were fun. You're not really pushing yourself. You're not really solving a company problem. You're just doing some stuff. You need to have that level of accountability in the organization throughout the quarter. When you show up and you're saying, yep, this is off track, and no one kind of checks you and says, well, what are you doing to get it back on track? You're not in an accountable organization. You need to have that pushback. You need to have that conflict. It's healthy, right? You need to have that accountability. And the best accountability comes horizontally, right? It's coming from your peers. Your boss can nag at you all day. I'm sure my techs have heard me nag at them endlessly, and they're like, yeah, it's just Jordan being mad about something. But the minute one of their peers steps up and be like, no, you kind of flaked on this. So you gotta have pure accountability in place. So takeaways from today, we're kind of getting to the end of this. We'll get some questions and answers, but organizational culture is a choice, right? Every day we show up, we make decisions that shape our organizational culture, and we don't have to have it squishy and mushy. We can use frameworks that are familiar, comfortable, and intentional, and we can get where we need to be in an objective way, probably. Yeah, questions.
Wow, there was so much gold in that. I think there's a lot for people to take away and think about, and certainly a lot of interesting discussion in the chat. We've got a number of questions, so shall we dive into them?
Yeah.
Let me just see here. So the first one is, will the slides or all of the controls? Oh, fantastic.
So yes, I didn't really think about that before like submitting this because it got rejected a bunch of times, and I was like, oh, I should probably put this all somewhere. The deck will be available immediately. You just hit me up on LinkedIn or whatever. I'll send you the deck right now. I need to pretty up the full control thing. Right now, it's a busted Excel sheet and some documentation. I would love if somebody, if a scale pad of the world or a control map of the world or any of these guys want to talk and throw this in there as one of their available GRC platforms. I'd be more than happy to work on that. But yeah, my goal is to put it out there. I want feedback from the community. I listed this as a version 0.5. This is a work in progress because it's I don't think I have all the answers here. So yeah, it'll be available for sure, and I'll let you all know when it is.
Fantastic. Next question. How do you set a career path for techs when they're heading towards the top of the pay scale and they don't necessarily have any capacity for wall managers or senior roles to move them into?
Yeah, that's life. We're MSPs, we're not infinite. That's kind of just business. And I think having that honest conversation before they get there is the best way to address it, right? Like,
Mm.
I don't think managers are like, I don't think we should ever position a management role as the next step up just because somebody wants to make more money. I think being a manager is a completely different skill set, and you have
Mm.
to go into that leadership role wanting to be a manager, not wanting to be a higher paid engineer. So you
Mm.
should make sure that you're not shoving people into manager tracks just to make more money. But I think it just comes down to the business we're in. I think training people and trying to scale and develop maybe new offerings that meet that criteria, that's where investing kind of goes in. Like maybe right now you're outsourcing your GRC kind of compliance as a service stuff to a vendor. Maybe you can skill someone up and bring that in house once you get 2 or 3 people familiar with it. So I think looking at ways to grow your organization and come up with new offerings, that's what builds those paths out. I can tell you that I got to grow a lot early in my career because somebody decided that our company needed an automation engineer, and I really like PowerShell. So
Mm.
I got to break out, invent a new role, and kind of go to town on it.
Mm.
And I think if you find the people who can really cut those new roles open for you and build something, it's worth it. So you got to kind of think out of the box sometimes and figure out how do we get value out of these people when you have the right people.
I think that's a good one. And before I jump into the next question, there was a discussion in chat where they were talking about what about employees that don't necessarily want to be managers and how can you keep them, still engaged? And I think that's a great example. If you can give them other opportunities to do
Yeah.
other new things and things like that, I think that's a good one.
And not
Um,
everybody, I think somebody else called it out too, right? Not everybody wants to be promoted. Some people are happy.
mm,
And I think that, like, I don't know why people look down on that. I think everybody's on a quest to be happy in their life. Like, if you can
mm,
get the role that pays you enough, that gives you that contentment, so you can go live whatever your life is, and you're happy, high fucking five, we did it. Like that is the
Yeah.
goal. So I'm not
Yeah.
gonna ever look down on somebody who's like, no, I'm really content in my job. Like that guy's living their best life. Good for them. Like move on to the
Yeah.
next guy.
If everyone's different, and
Yeah.
you just got to find, and part of that's listening to them and hearing where they want to go next. Next question. My company sucks at culture. How am I supposed to change it? Because I'd like to try.
Pick one of these things that we talked about today and just go implement it. Like I think the trap a lot of us get into is the idea that only managers or only leaders in the company or like senior executives can change
Mm,
things. I can tell you definitively, more often than not in my career, I've had to set the one-on-ones with my managers. When I wanted
mm,
that better meeting cadence, and if I wanted those quarterly meetings, there's been more than one
mm,
company where I'm like, hey, it'd be really cool if we had a quarterly meeting for our department. Why don't I just throw it on the schedule for us? And like
mm,
I'll build out like a deck, and then you can give your part of it. And
mm,
like I'll manage my boss, and I'll manage the thing that I want to do because
mm,
not everybody's perfect. Not everybody knows the next step. So facilitate it.
mm,
Be like, hey man,
mm,
like I'd like to meet weekly. What day is good for you? Cool. Here's
mm.
the agenda for the meeting, and show up.
For people that might look at this and go, this is a lot to get started. Like, where, I suppose, really quickly, where could you get started? It's all right to just go, yeah, let's implement it, but where's a starting point for somebody that might be looking at this and going, shit, this is a lot. Where's sort of step one here?
I like Simon Sinek's like circle of influence kind of thing. So pick the one that is closest to what you can control
Mhm.
and lead by example in that area. Like if you start out with, hey, CEO of company, you need to tell me what the purpose of this business is, you're probably going to have a much harder time than if you show up and say, hey, manager, I think it'd be cool if we had one on ones just so I could stay on the same page and make sure I'm doing my
Mm,
job really well. That would help me a lot. And then what will probably happen is you'll start doing really well, and the manager will be like, shit, I should do this for other people. And they'll do that. And
mm,
then, and it kind of expands. And if you have other teams in your organization, you sort of raise the bar for how your group is performing. And then the rest of the org is like, oh, shit, how are they doing better? It's like, oh, we actually just meet weekly now. And turns out that
yeah.
solved 80% of the problems. So you pick the things that are in your area of control and influence first. The things that aren't, don't stress over them. You can't really fix that, but try to influence what you can. And remember, if you get 10 of these done, you're still 10 better off. So that's great.
Yeah. Cool. Next question. How do you convince your company that your culture has changed and to embrace it? Yes, a lot of dollars and time was spent developing it, and time's changed.
Um, I think you have to go back to the core things, right? Like, what is the purpose of the company? What are your core values? Are you living those? Situations vary, businesses, purposes change over time. Like the
Mhm,
values of companies change over time. So it's a hard question to answer, but I think it's try to understand why the changes occurred and try to figure out like what are you actually trying to get out of the conversation, right? Like what are you trying
mm,
to achieve by having the conversation? If your goal is to show up and be like, hey, I hate working here, this place sucks, just go find another job. Like that's okay. Like it's not a like a dig at whoever you are. It's just a
mm,
if the place sucks and you don't think you can fix it, go find somebody who appreciates you and fits you. But if you're trying to change, go figure out what the original idea was. Like what led us there, and like did we
mm,
just misstep? Was it a good idea that kind of just caught us off guard, or was there something that maybe you didn't know was happening that was driving the change? Because I think that happens a lot, right? Like there was a big thing behind the scenes that our techs are shielded from. We don't tell everybody everything about the bad days, and we have to make changes as a result, right? Budgets get cut because big client left, and now we're sort of in a hole. Like we don't want to scare you and tell you your job is at risk, but the company might be right now, so we're cutting back on some stuff. Like you kind of have to assume maybe that the people making the decisions made it in good faith with data that you just don't have. So try to figure out what
mm,
that data might have been.
mm. Got it. I think that's it for the questions now. Just do a bit of a
Cool.
look.
I think we're how are we on time? I was kind of started rushing because I thought we were a little over, but I think we're
We
right on time.
so yeah, we are just a little bit over. For everybody for all 84 people that are in here, when you leave the session, click on schedule in the upper right, and right after that, we're going to jump into the very next um, uh, one, and just keep going, and we'll go from there. So
Cool.
yeah, Josh,
Awesome.
thank you so much, Jordan.
Thanks, Josh.
Gangster as always,
Cheers,
man.
guys. Awesome.
Absolutely love it.
Cool. I appreciate
Yeah,
everybody being here. Thanks, everybody.
thanks. See ya.
See you guys in a minute.